Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bruin Dash, the UCLA football show on Dash Sports TV. My name is Sam Connon. I will be your one and only host today. We could not be joined by Jack Perez today. Something came up. It's all good though. We'll make do, talk Bruin football, and see how this goes. So it was a pretty solid win on Sunday. It's weird playing on Sunday, but UCLA did it a few years ago against Texas A&M. This year against Cal, and went pretty well, 34-10, a pretty convincing victory. Not wire to wire, but the second half pretty much in cruise control. A lot to talk about there. We can break through those the keys to the game, the key takeaways, and really just the offense as a whole looked totally different. First time under Chip Kelly that it looked efficient, fast, quick. Any word you can use to as a synonym for blur. That's pretty much what it was. It was pretty similar to Kelly's Oregon offense in a lot of ways. So we'll break that down, see what this team can do offensively moving forward. And then you got the Oregon game coming up on Saturday. They gave it a 12:30 kickoff time earlier this evening. So it's a pretty tough matchup for UCLA, sitting at 1-1, going up against the number 11 team in the country in Oregon. But stranger things have happened. We'll see how it goes. So if you are interested in joining in on the conversation, help me out facilitating this at all, please leave your thoughts in the comments. I'll get to as many of those as I can, and I guess we'll see how this goes. So starting things off with that Cal game, like I said, Bruins won 34-10. It was pretty much dominant on both sides of the ball. At the beginning, not so much. It was looking like it was more of the same for UCLA. They had that block punt on their first offensive drive, and then Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a pretty bad pick there on his second. And then after that, down 3-0, it was a totally different team. Just completely flipped the switch. I think the first thing to go through is the defense. The defense a week ago against Colorado was pretty horrible. Broussard, Neuer absolutely tore them apart, and it really looked like there hadn't been any progress from 2019 to 2020. I know they brought in new personnel, they were bringing in a new system, and it didn't seem to matter. They didn't have an identity week one. They got run all over. They got passed all over. It just was not a very good defensive game. But then against Cal, who has behind Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the next most experienced quarterback in the conference in Chase Garbers, and a running back that rushed for over 100 yards against them just last year, they couldn't move the ball. And that's unique, that you don't expect to hear that when a team goes up against UCLA. That's not their calling card. It hasn't been their calling card for a very long time. Not under Jim Mora, not under Chip Kelly, not last week against Colorado. But when Cal, they put up 54 rushing yards. That's 200 fewer than last week against Colorado when Broussard just tore them up. It was, I think you can really attribute it to just their aggression on the defensive side of the ball. It was mostly the same personnel. The formations, it was pretty similar, but they just, talking to Quantrez Knight after the game, saying that they really just had to get more vertical, had to get in the backfield. I think that's what it was all about. We saw a little bit of it against Colorado, especially early on, but this team had 9 tackles for loss against Cal. They had 8 the week before against Colorado. And last year they averaged a little over 5 per game. This team is getting into the backfield. They're disrupting at the line of scrimmage. They're really just throwing opposing offensives off. And that's not what they did last year against Cal. They only had 2 games to prepare, or two days to prepare for this game after the Utah game got canceled. And if they looked at scouting from last year, at the end of the season, game number 12 against UCLA, this was a very different defense than the one that showed up last time. They were disruptive. They were aggressive. They were hitting Garbers all day. It really just was something else. You didn't expect to see it. I think the key players to that were, you had Caleb Johnson, who had 2.5 tackles for loss, a sack and a half, and an interception. And Osa Odighizuwa had 2.5 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. Montrez Knight had 1.5 tackles for loss. Daytona Jackson, he had a half a tackle for loss. These guys were just active. They were really just beating up this Cal offensive line. They were throwing them off the rhythm, and they got a lead early thanks to their offense, and that put them in a really good spot. There's no denying that. It gave them the flexibility and the cushion to be aggressive. When you have that 20-point lead in the second half, you can just go all in and just really experiment with your defense, and they did that. So they got sacks, they got tackles for loss, they hit the quarterback, they hurried him, they got an interception for the first time all year. They actually forced a turnover, which is good. Turnover battle was even because that DTR pick, but still, they're forcing them. That's progress. But just all over the field, secondary, linebackers, at the lines, the front seven as a whole, the safeties especially, were just active. They were aggressive. They were really balling out on Sunday, and that's great to see an early Sunday morning game, which is not the usual environment for these guys. But talking to them after the game, they were just saying it's like high school. It's like pickup. It's like this Pop Warner stuff where they wake up early and play these games, and it was good to see the defense especially have that energy. And then on the other side of the ball, the run game was huge for UCLA. I mean, Dorian Thompson-Robinson had a good game throwing the ball too. He's pretty efficient. He didn't even attempt a pass in the fourth quarter, so it's not like they needed much from him. But Demetric Felton had 100, and he had 107 yards. Britton Brown had 71 and that long touchdown, almost 30 yards, where he broke a few tackles. Keegan Jones was in on things. DTR was running the ball. He had 12 carries. And he didn't even take a single sack. Those were all actual designed carries, or at least scrambling, just something. The ground game for UCLA, it looks like this is their identity moving forward. I mean, we'll get a little bit more in depth with that when we talk about Chip Kelly and the game plan and what this team's offense could look like moving forward. But just on Sunday, the ground attack was efficient. I mean, Britton Brown averaged almost 6 yards per carry. Felton and DTR averaged over 4. So they knew what they were doing. They had good like zone run scheme. They were really just they were doing what they needed to do, following blockers. I mean that touchdown. I mean, I know we're talking run game, but the touchdown to was it? Yeah, it was Charles Njoku. The screen pass, the short slant. It was he had multiple offensive linemen leading the charge for him on that. He had Sam Razzo out there, and that's just what you like to see. You like to see a mobile, active offensive line, because that helps when you're doing the screen passes, the slip screens, which worked really well against Colorado the week before, and then when you're running that zone run scheme. So it was really nice to see that from UCLA. It's really nice to see that even with Joshua Kelly gone, this run game can be something legit. It can be something that other teams are afraid of. And when you put up almost 250 yards on the ground, teams are going to have to take you seriously. So when you lose a great running back to the NFL, you don't expect your run offense to be as good the next year. And I mean, last week against Colorado, they obviously weren't running the ball a lot because they got in a 28-point hole. But now that they were playing with a lead and in a close game in the first half, really, they showed that the run game is going to be a big part of their offense, and they have a lot of different guys who can contribute. Kaz Allen, Brown, Felton, Keegan Jones, quarterbacks. That's what you need. That's what this offense needs. And then just the last takeaway was really that the season's not over. UCLA is not dead in the water like people were saying a week ago. It's not great that they got kind of steamrolled by Colorado. I know it ended up being a close game and there were promising things, but when USC and Colorado are both 2-0 and you're 1-1 in a short season, it's not, you're obviously not in the driver's seat. You don't control your own destiny, but it's something. UCLA has never been 500, let alone over 500 under Chip Kelly. And that's pretty depressing. I don't think too many people expected that to happen when they brought in Kelly and they spent so much money on Kelly to be consistently and just always a sub 500 team. Now that they're 500, they have their first chance to get over 500. And it's against Oregon. They're definitely outmatched. They're an underdog on the road. Probably won't happen. But just the fact that they have a shot at getting over 500 is sadly really encouraging. It's sad because the ceiling should be so much higher, the hope should be so much higher, but it is what it is. There's improvement, there's possibility, there's hope. There's a few more games left on the slate. So it's not over. This team's not dead. This team's not horrible. They're not bad. They're in the thick of things. They're fighting. We'll see how it goes. So that's pretty much all the major takeaways from the Cal game. 34-10 victory is pretty solid. They lost to them last year to finish out the season. It was pretty sad. I know a lot of people at the Rose Bowl just kind of had the life sucked out of it, but turn things around, beat Cal, and a lot of that is due to the offensive game plan. I was talking earlier about how that the cancellation on Friday shook things up a bit. Cal had their game canceled against Arizona State. UCLA had their game canceled against Utah, and Martin Jarman came together with Utah, Pac-12, whoever it is, scrambled in a few hours and got that game on the slate on Sunday. So it was a really quick turnaround for sure. But I wrote in a column this week on Sports Pac-12, who's Dash Sports TV's partner. They publish all of our written content, so you can go find the rest of this column there. I was writing that I think this was the great equalizer for the UCLA offense. It kind of leveled things out and kind of eliminated the matchup side of their game plan, which I think is really important because it showed that Chip Kelly has been trying way too hard for way too long, 2+ years here at UCLA, to kind of over game plan. I know that's not always an insult. You would think that preparation is great, but when his game plan that takes a full week to put together falls flat so often, and he's running that pro offense, that pro style offense with athletic guys at almost every position, it's really clearly to a lot of people not what he should be doing. When you take that out of the equation and you give him 2 days to play a defense that he really just doesn't know all that, like, it didn't get that much time to prepare, and he decides to go out there with a spread offense, his blur style offense, and basically run it down their throat, have efficient passing, take care of the ball, score a lot of points, no huddle, very fast. And when you look at that, they win by three scores. It's better than they have been able to do in a long time. And I think it's proof that Kelly kind of has to ditch this pro style offense. I know it's just one game and it was under very weird circumstances. Understandable. I get it. But Cal is supposed to be one of the top teams in the Pac-12 North, and who knows, they still might be. And I know their defensive line was kind of wiped out by injuries and quarantine, COVID. But still, you take this game plan. I don't know what teams can do to stop it. I really don't know how they slow it down, because this team is efficient. The way they're running that offense, the way they did this week, it was really ideal. And when I think that's what they need to do moving forward. That's how they maximize Dorian Thompson-Robinson's potential. It's how they maximize Demetric Felton's potential. That's how they really get all of their important pieces involved how they should be. Because it's great to run a pro-style offense to try to get these guys ready for the NFL or try to prove that you're more mature or put together. But it really just doesn't work when you have a mobile spread QB like TTR, when you have an all-purpose back like Demetric Felton. You need to pick the offense that best fits their skills and their development. And that's what this hurry up offense did. And I think that's how you max out the potential of this offense. So we got a question from the Guru. He says, why didn't Kelly use the blur offense earlier if it was so successful at Oregon? To be frank, because he's stubborn. That's the simple way to put it. I mean, as we all saw, it was very efficient this week. It had been efficient in the past. at Oregon, like you said, but it just hasn't, for whatever reason, whenever asked, he said, nope, this is what we do now. That was 10 years ago. We can't just look at the past and run what we used to. And in some respects, I get that. You don't want people to have figured you out. You can't rely on what you used to do because people have film and they can game plan to stop that. I do understand that. But the way that Oregon offense worked, it was so unstoppable. You have similar personnel, or at least malleable personnel, who can be put into similar roles at UCLA. The easy choice is to run the same offense. Kelly hasn't done that in the past because shift in philosophy, stubbornness, whatever it is. He rejects the notion of running it every time he talks to the media. He would probably deny that he ran a different offense this week if you asked him about it tomorrow. But he did, and it was good for the Bruins. The guru said Allen's been with this program for 3 years, might have been the fastest guy in all California. Absolutely. I mean, he runs track and field for UCLA. He had state champion in sprinting in high school in the state of California. He has been an athlete. He's been quick. He's been really, really athletic for a long time. And I don't think he's gotten too many more touches than he has in the past. He had a 30-yard touchdown against Arizona a few years ago. He had that long touchdown against Cincinnati or Oklahoma. He's had these big plays in the last 2 years. It's not all that often, not as often as you'd like to see. But I think it did hurt his snaps last year when Felton kind of came onto the scene, moved from receiver to running back, because they probably were going to play similar roles, the more receiving back, like all-purpose back. But Felton is more mature and has better vision, better ball carrying skills. So I understand why he won that. But I mean, Allen has been playing a lot more snaps. They've been running 20 personnel a lot more often this year. Allen's been in motion a lot, running from the slot outside, lining up in the backfield with Felton, having two backs in. It's really good to see them switch that up because a lot of those plays have worked well. You've had screens set up like that, and you had Keegan Jones who's in on these plays too. So Kelly seems to be utilizing his running backs a lot more often, which is good. This team is deep at running back. They have 4 really good running backs who all have their own strengths, and they have a running QB. So you run the spread, you run hurry up. That's really all you need to do. As you saw with this 34-point outburst against Cal, probably could have been more. I mean, we say 34 like it's crazy, but I mean it kind of is for this UCLA team, which has had kind of a lackluster offense the past couple of years. Yeah, it has its moments. Washington State scores 60 points. USC last year score over 30, 35 points. That's solid. But this was efficient. It was fast. It was controlled. And I think you got to stick with this game plan moving forward. I really don't care who you're playing. I don't care how good the defensive line is, how good the linebackers are, even if it's a weak secondary. This is the way your team succeeds. This is the way you maximize Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I'll say it again. All these guys fit this system so much better. So I know chances are Kelly only probably went this route because they didn't have a lot of time to game plan, didn't have a lot of time to scout. But that's better. If you're putting so much time into the opponent and how you match up with them and how they do this and that, you're losing sight of how your offense succeeds in a vacuum. I know you don't want to isolate things to that all the time, but how do your guys best succeed? In this case, it's running the spread offense, running the blur, and I hope they stick with that moving forward. So if you want a little more thoughts on that, you can go to sportspac12.com. My column's up there in partnership with Dash Sports TV. Like I said, posting all of our written content. So you can find the link to that on our website as well at dashsports.tv. So moving on to the final topic of the day. Got the Oregon game coming up. UCLA is definitely an underdog. It's not looking great for them. Oregon probably has the better chance of anyone else in the conference to run the table and to go to the college football playoff. You can't really expect to beat college football playoff contenders, but it happens. Who knows? I mean, not saying that Washington State last year was even close to as good as this Oregon team, but UCLA was 0-3. They go up to Pullman under the lights late Saturday night, and they win that crazy comeback shootout game against the Cougars. So there's a possibility. It's who knows? It could happen. UCLA has won as a road underdog before. It's lost as a home favorite before. So there's a lot of possibilities out there. But this Oregon team specifically, they've had their moments this year. I mean, they're 2-0. It's better than you are. So you can't really fault them for that. But they haven't been perfect. I mean, there's a reason they haven't really been jumping up in the AP poll. You would like to think that if you're an Oregon fan, if you're someone on Oregon, you'd like to think that you get a little more respect now that Pac-12 is playing again and you win the first 2 games of your schedule. But I mean, they kind of handled Stanford, even though it was close earlier on. They get a 2-score victory over Washington State, but they're barely covering the spread. So they're doing what they should, which is why they're staying pat as a team. I mean, there's a certain. I mean, they're good. They are the best team in the Pac-12, but not really saying as much as best team in the ACC or the best team in the SEC. Pac-12 is a weak conference, and chaos ensues every year. Oregon loses to Arizona State at the end of last year when they really should have been going to the college football playoff. So who knows what happens? I think the one thing that has been an absolute positive for Oregon is Tyler Shaw, and their quarterback. He's coming in for Justin Herbert, who's absolutely killing it with the Chargers, really making his case for Rookie of the Year. And I think that Chuck, he is really doing everything he needs to. He's probably the best quarterback in the Pac-12 right now. I think he has the highest passer rating of any quarterback in the Pac-12. So, I mean, he's completing almost 70% of his passes, averaging almost 250 yards per game. He has 6 total touchdowns. He's really putting together a complete season. It's really good to see from him, from a young quarterback who's coming in for really a generational QB in Justin Herbert. So Tyler Shuck, he's good. That's going to be tough for UCLA. The secondary that was carved up by Colorado, by Sam Neuer, who, I mean, as we've seen, is a pretty good quarterback. But he was a backup for 3 years. He was a safety last year. Not really the cream of the crop. Tyler Shuck is good. He's really good. I mean, we saw what happened against Chase Garbers last week too. UCLA can shut down these good quarterbacks, but they're going to need to get an early lead. They're going to have to dominate Oregon's play calling so they can kind of read these things. But all things considered, UCLA is going to be outmatched in terms of the UCLA secondary against the Oregon pass game with Shuck. So it'll be interesting to see. I like to think that this is probably the outside of week 1 going Keaton Slovis against Jaden Daniels. This might be the next most important quarterback battle, at least so far this season, because Tyler Shuck is impressing a lot of people. Like I said, best passer rating in the conference. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson's been putting together a pretty good season. Doesn't have a very high completion percentage, but I mean, he's scoring a lot of touchdowns. He's working with the legs. He's outplayed Jaden Daniels so far this year in Daniels' one game, which was not very good against USC. But I would like to see who comes out on top between DTR and Shuck, because DTR beat out Chase Garbers last week. I feel like we all are pretty confident that Keaton Slovis is the best in the conference, but there's going to be a battle all year long for that 2 spot. DTR has shown so far that he's better than Garbers, but can he show he's better than Shuck? DTR has to prove a lot of people wrong. And even though he's not guarding, he's not playing corner, he's not a defensive end, he can't impact what happens to Shuck. Quarterback battles are always fun to look at. They're always important. And I want to see how the 2 of them go head to head this weekend. So that's one of the bigger storylines for me, Shuck in general, and then the DTR versus Shuck quarterback battle for kind of that second, third, fourth spot in the Pac-12, seeing what they can do. And yeah, I mean, I was saying earlier that anything can happen. The UCLA has had some solid wins under Kelly, which is weird because they've been bad under Kelly, all things considered. 3-9, 4-8, but when you beat USC 2 years ago, USC wasn't great that year, but you weren't favorites. You weren't supposed to win that game. Last year, you beat Washington State. Last week, you beat Cal. This Oregon team is better than any of those other three teams. This is different. And being on the road in Autzen Stadium is different. Even though there's no fans, it's still tough. It's still a difficult environment. It's always hard playing on the road when you're traveling. But who knows? I won't pick UCLA to win. I feel like that's a little naive. That's too prisoner of the moment, riding too high on that Cal win. Cal could be horrible. They could be trash for all we know, and that win means basically nothing, as was the case when they beat Cal 2 years ago and still finished 3-9. But it will be an entertaining game. I am pretty confident that UCLA won't get blown out, even though they're definitely the less talented, worst coached team. But I mean, you said they got outplayed by a lot against Colorado, and they still made it a 6-point game. They're fighting to the last second. If anything, DTR is really good at leading comebacks, even if they're not successful. Last year against USC, they lost by 17, but DTR was putting in his all. Chip Kelly was keeping his foot on the pedal all afternoon long. And even though you lose by more than 2 scores, the effort was there the whole time. So, I mean, I think these players are going to be going all in, knowing that this is their chance, because so many people jumped off the ship after the Colorado loss that Cal win didn't even do him that many favors. People who watch the whole game, people who follow the team closely, know that this team got a lot better from week 1 to week 2, or at least they put on a lot better showing. If you beat Oregon, you let people know that you're real, you're legit. You're not necessarily a threat to go 6-1, win the Pac-12. No, we're not really talking about that, but just as a program, Chip Kelly's UCLA program has been, I think the worst thing you can say about it is that it's been irrelevant. I mean, 7-17 through 2 years is bad. But I mean, if someone goes 7-17 at Alabama, or maybe even like a Tennessee or Ohio State or Wisconsin, Michigan, those teams get labeled as bad. People care. UCLA has fallen off the national map, and that's not great. It was the only college football game on Sunday, and no one was talking about it. So if UCLA can go and just compete, put on a really good show against Oregon, that's good for the program. It's kind of sad that that's good for the program at this point. Your $100 million football facility screams different. You should be a lot bigger and better than this. But where this program is now, you need to get eyes on it. You need to get people around the country, and really just in Pac-12 country, you need to get them interested. You need to get them to believe in UCLA. And that doesn't mean a win. I'm not picking a UCLA win, but it's also not out of the cards. So final score prediction, I will go Oregon 37, UCLA 30. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be an interesting game for sure. So that is it for this week's episode of Bruin Dash. You can come back on Friday, and Jack will be back. He will be co-hosting a special crossover show with Duck Dash to really preview the game, talk about it more in depth at length, and break down what could lie ahead. But for now, my name is Sam Connon. I have been your host yet again. Thank you so much for joining, participating in the live chat. You can follow Dash Sports on Twitter at Dash Sports TV. You can go to our website, dashsports.tv. Like I said, we have a partnership with Sports Pac-12 that publishes all of our written content from our hosts and columnists. They are sportspac12.com. You can follow them on Twitter at sportspac12. So you can go get my column on the UCLA offense a read and come back on Friday for a special episode of Bruin Dash. So thank you so much for joining me today, and see you next time.